Hey guys, welcome back. So getting back into more talk about Doomsday Clock, to where as far as released issues, we're now in the 10th hour, which has felt like the longest wait ever, but I've been very forgiving of it, mainly for the fact that it's been dropping some subtle, mind-blowing concepts of which I would like to continue to elaborate on, and of which I'll be referencing much of what we've seen play out throughout issue 10, and doing so with the addition of the historical information that we've recently received about the DC Multiverse and its origin, to where we've recently discovered the literal formula to why Superman and Batman are so important. And so in this video, I want to proceed to break that down a little bit further, and mainly doing so focusing on Superman, but also explain how Dr. Manhattan has inadvertently stepped into a position of defeat. So let's get into this. But first, if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to catch us spills every week, and don't forget to hit that bell up top so we can squad up in the comments for the first hour. Alright, so first and foremost, just a quick refresher about some of what we've been talking about as far as the origin of the multiverse, to where the world forger who has crafted these different worlds, that the ones that rise, they are the ones that he's deemed to be hopeful, and more or less the ones lacking hope, which he would consider decayed, which is why he created Barbatos to consume these worlds, but instead Barbatos created the dark multiverse with them, which of course was something that wasn't supposed to happen. But as far as the worlds that rose up, they all stem out from the Prime Universe, which is at the center and otherwise known as Earth Zero, and throughout all these worlds which are connected throughout the bleed, they branch out like a tree, but together they collectively make the multiverse. And so now Perpetua, the mother of the Monitor, the Anti-Monitor, and the World Forger, she created these three to build, preserve, and contain this multiverse with her own intentions, which I talked about in a previous video. But the important thing to keep in mind in relation to Doomsday Clock is that even though she tried to mold the multiverse into Perpetual and Doom, the power she was given to do so is still stemmed from hope and justice, because her power as a super celestial stems from the source, and the only power she has is that which she is given and corrupted. And for that reason, no matter what she does, the fundamental workings of her multiverse, they still operate on the bases which were created by the source, to which for something to live and strive, they need hope and justice, with hope pertaining to life and justice pertaining to action. Her plan was to use these tools to create a perpetual universe which would live forever and protect her from the source so she could also live forever. But the perpetual is the opposite of action, and the perpetual leads to doom, which is the opposite of hope. And these are mainly the four pillars of which the DC Multiverse stands upon. These laws originate from the source, they supersede time and space, and they connect the multiverse much like a tree which stems from Earth Zero. And so now you're probably wondering, how does all this connect to Dr. Manhattan? Well, I'm glad you asked, because Dr. Manhattan entered this multiverse, and even more specifically this universe, originating from another universe with another set of rules. And according to those rules, he understood its structure. He could literally see the fabrics of time and space to the point of where he could view multiple events happening simultaneously, and in his universe, this gave him a level of understanding of how things operate. And this is a perspective he obtained many years earlier, repairing clocks and watches and understanding that certain pieces, wherever they were meant to be, served their purpose within that greater structure. And with this understanding, he was able to see his universe like clockwork, and to the extent to where there was very few things that he did not understand. And so upon leaving his universe, you got to think of it like stepping out of the very system and reality which you learn to walk and talk, which is also a system that you've pretty much mastered and learned like clockwork, and you leave from there into a completely different system which has its similarities, but because it's not set up the same way, the methods that he had used in his universe, they seldomly work here. And upon stepping into a universe which is built upon hope and justice, it's literally like the fabrics of space and time, and the universe itself has him blindfolded, because with this multiverse which stems out like a tree and stemming out from Earth Zero, of which Superman is the manifestation of hope personified, in addition to being the Superman of Earth Zero, his connection to Earth Zero which branches out to the multiverse, this combination gives him a ridiculous connection that predates the universe, to where it's not even about how powerful Superman is or how hard he can punch, but it's more so to the fact that this Earth Zero Superman, he is comprised of the very essence which is hope, which connects him to the universe itself, otherwise known as Earth Zero, which is also the root of the multiverse itself. And so now all this we know mainly through the words of the World Forger, the creator of the multiverse, who told Batman that the Superman of this prime Earth, that this Superman is unique and that he is not like any other, to where even upon death, his cells still contain life. And I also want to add right here that you guys have been asking me like, what order does this happen in as far as the Justice League in relation to Doomsday Clock, of which I have my guesses, but I'm not 100% sure. And for that reason, I want to wait till one of them conclude before I put that out there, just so I can give you guys the accurate information. Because at this point, for the most part, they've only referenced Crisis, Dark Knight's Metal, Flashpoint, Darkseid War, but not so much of each other. But I just want to let you guys know that I hear you, and I'll definitely tie the strings together after one of these wrap up. But for now, just keep in mind Hope, Justice, the Perpetual, and Doom. And so for anybody who wants a little more clarity on that, I got another video where I go much more into depth about it. Actually a couple videos on the Justice League playlist, but there I talk about Batman's final armor. But overall, that narrative will give you a much better understanding of why Earth Zero Superman and Earth Zero Batman are so important, because of their connections to Hope and Justice, which branch out through the multiverse, both light and dark. And I got a link in the description to the Justice League playlist if you need to check that out, then come back here. But moving forward, now that we talked about the universe's origin and it stemming from Hope and how that connects to Superman, what I want to do is dig a little bit deeper into that, as well as talk about Dr. Manhattan, who is a man of much perpetual behavior, who has now arrived in the universe of Hope. And I want to start off this side of the explanation dealing with Superman in relation to the Firestorm incident, and also the whole underlying issue of the Superman theory, which on the surface of reading Doomsday Clock, it looks like one of those things that's like, okay, why? Why are we talking about this? What does this have to do with anything? But on the contrary, the concept of the Superman theory has to do with everything. And so at its face value, the Superman theory is mainly this political issue dealing with the suspicion of why so many metahumans come to the United States, or better yet come from the United States. Were they created by the government, or they're being sponsored by the government? And after the appearance of Superman, why is it that so many metahumans appeared in the United States after him? And this mainly stemmed the question, is there a connection and is the government behind it? But I'd have to say, as far as the Superman theory, the biggest thing to take from it would have to be the cause and effect connection with Superman, which digs so much deeper than Dr. Manhattan realizes at this moment. And so now, mainly because how this panned out with Russia's accusations on Firestorm, which led to Firestorm combating those accusations, which did more harm than help, with him losing control and pretty much turning a crowd of people into glass, which I guess was a way of the writers kind of proving like man was made of the dust of the earth, which is why naturally we return to dust after we die. And so I guess that's why when Firestorm heated them so rapidly, they just turned into glass, because that's how you make glass, heated sand. But at the end of the day, the issue, the resolve, was Superman searching for Firestorm. And with Superman taking action, he made a deal with Black Adam so eventually he would have somewhere to stay. And when he did eventually find Firestorm, he essentially then brought him hope to a hopeless place. But of course, with this happening, it didn't end so well, even though after this he had found the solution on how to return everybody back. And after returning back to that site and trying to implement the resolve, of course everything went left. And even though Superman, who was trying to protect him, and the people who were directly affected in this incident, even still it ended in a calamity, which was then ended by this mysterious explosion, which clearly had Ozymandias written all over it. But with these things taking place and everything that had been said with the Superman theory, it's almost as if it plays as a metaphor of the impending cycle of crisis of which the universe is bound to meet over and over again. But also on the surface of this taking place, it was also used as a method to direct the heroes towards Mars, where the energy signatures seem to have come from, and with all the heroes who were available heading that way, with the exception of a few, one of those being Batman, who is most certain that this explosion did not originate from where it had seemed to, but he had pieced together that these were the workings of a trap. And although he wasn't sure from who exactly, at this point he just knows that Firestorm wasn't the cause, and he highly doubts that it was whoever was on Mars. But it was building up to this point that he's starting to realize that there's more validity in the words of this new Rorschach, that had he taken more serious earlier on, he'd be a lot closer to getting to the bottom of this. But back on Mars, as far as the showdown between the heroes and Dr. Manhattan, well, showdown if that's what you want to call it, because they lost ridiculously with little to no effort from Dr. Manhattan. And what's crazy is because we know during this time that Batman was trying to send his message, which took like 11 minutes and 5 seconds, or at least that's the projected time that it'll take for the message to reach the heroes. What's crazy is that this actually lets us know that the time between the whole conversation with Dr. Manhattan and the actual showdown in its entirety all went down under 11 minutes, which is a pretty interesting number due to the fact that everything that happens here, up to Dr. Manhattan incapacitating the heroes, it all stretches through your 9th, 10th, and 11th issue, and within all of this, it covers under 11 minutes. But after this altercation with the heroes, Dr. Manhattan he begins to go into his monologue / explanation of his arrival into the DC universe, and though he essentially means the present day heroes no harm, he does mention that it was necessary to incapacitate them for the moment for reasons that'll soon be made clear. But with Dr. Manhattan arriving in the DC universe back in 1938 and also at about 11:50 p.m., and when he arrives, he runs into a younger version of Carver Coleman who's being harassed by police for sleeping in an alley, and it intrigues Dr. Manhattan that after being hit over the head by these police officers, that this young man still checked the officer's pulse after the officer was knocked down by the arrival of Dr. Manhattan, of course. And this was one of the first things that intrigued Dr. Manhattan about Carver Coleman, because this was one of his first encounters where he had noticed that the people here in this universe were different. And this is very important because this is where Dr. Manhattan begins to discover, by way of Carver, early on the complexities and mechanics of a multiverse, and doing so by using Carver as a compass of sorts. And so Dr. Manhattan, who takes him to a local diner because he knows that he's hungry, and he shifts the light frequencies around him so nobody else is just looking at this naked blue guy, just looking at him weird. But the whole purpose of Dr. Manhattan sitting down with Carver, which is pretty ironic, the purpose of it is for him to adjust his own vision, because much like I talked about earlier with the way that Dr. Manhattan had seen things in his own universe, where he could see the present and the future all like one connected canvas in one glance, but it's here at his arrival where he sees Carver that he notices when he looks into the future, which for Dr. Manhattan is like looking to your left or right, but with Carver, who's like Dr. Manhattan's test subject, if you will. But with him, he looks into his future and he's able to focus and see a single streamline from 1938 all the way through 1955, with Carver obtaining a level of success but no longer being alive a couple years after. But at this time, still present in 1938, he leaves Carver at the diner after hearing a few people in the kitchen talking about this man who caught a car, to whom it was pretty obvious given the year that it has taken place, and the green car was kind of a giveaway too. But what's crazy about this is that Dr. Manhattan is like, we find out here that he can see pre-crisis and post-crisis both in the same, and it's kind of eerie the way that this is delivered, because when he arrives here pretty much at Action Comics #1, but it's here after leaving Carver at the diner to where he exercises his focus and he sees April 18th, 1938 both with and without Superman, which is pretty crazy because we know as far as the different multiverses within DC Comics, you have your first multiverse, which was destroyed in Crisis on the Infinite Earths, which brought everything into one single universe. And from a writer's standpoint, we've talked about this a number of times before. When DC, Marvel, whoever does this, they're just wiping the slate clean to simplify the narrative, fix continuity issues, and move forward with a clean, new, consistent story. So Crisis on Infinite Earths destroyed the multiverse and brought it all into one universe. But when we jump forward into Infinite Crisis, this is the narrative that brought back the multiverse, which is funny because in retrospect, it makes it so understandable why Dr. Manhattan is so confused, which is one reason that I like over in Justice League, Perpetua has explained the whole cycle of multiverses becoming universes and multiverses again, because she's been forced to watch this happen over the course of billions of years. But for Dr. Manhattan stepping into this fresh, his perspective is just looking at it for what it is at this current moment, and that being a multiverse branching out like a tree, and albeit from a single universe that is centered around hope. And this is one of the things that Dr. Manhattan begins to discover as he probes through the different branches, so to speak, and he sees everything pointing back to Superman. And it's whether his parents died when he was in high school, or even if they live long happy lives, it's like it's here that he discovers that his perpetual behavior, with him perpetually being inactive by allowing Carver Coleman to die, much like how in his universe he allowed the terrible actions of the comedian and of Ozymandias. But it's here where it dawns on him, and I don't know if he really gets it, but he says in this universe of hope, he's become the villain, to where he actually expresses the realization, the foundation of this new universe which he has entered into. But if he truly understands it, we'll have to wait and see. But that'll do it for this one, guys. There's so many things that I want to pick apart about Doomsday Clock, of which we have plenty of time to do, and with so many moving parts throughout the series, it's like you gotta take it piece by piece and break them down one at a time, or you'll just get lost in the sauce. But let me know your thoughts down below as far as my explanation of why it has to be Superman, with the way that the multiverse is set up and all. But let me know your thoughts down below, and we'll do it again in the next one. Alright, later.